For part one of this project, I chose to make a recipe website. Originally, I wanted to make this a one-page site, but I chose to include a landing page as part of the assignment. But I'm going to get rid of that part after the end of the semester here coming up. So let's get started. Here's my project. It's called Med Cooking. And over here on the left-hand side, you see the docs folder. I called the folder docs instead of public, I believe it is, just to make it easier to use with GitHub's pages. And here's the index page. It serves as a landing page for the website. There's nothing much here because, as I said, I'm going to get rid of it. It was kind of just a placeholder to satisfy requirements of the assignment. So let's just skip over to the recipes page, which is the main functionality of the site. As you can see, I chose to use Tailwind. We discussed it in class, and I really wanted to try it out. I'd never used it before we talked about it, and it's really interesting. I really enjoy working with it. It's a useful tool, and it makes creating CSS very fast. So I've really enjoyed working with it. Here is the nav bar for my website. Let's see. Here's the logo. Here are the buttons for the website, and this is for the full desktop version of the site. This isn't for the responsive mobile version, but here is the responsive mobile version. Here are the mobile version buttons and the mobile version menu. And then let's skip down here to the recipe cards. I decided to use a grid layout just to make layout easier, to make it look nice and neat. I tried to laying it out using a couple different methods, and I just found grid to be the easiest. Let's see, here are the actual recipe cards themselves. I chose to use recipe cards as modals because I'd never worked with modals before, and I just thought it'd be kind of fun and interesting to learn. Plus, it satisfied the requirement for JavaScript, so it kind of killed two birds with one stone. So this is the recipe card that you see on the website right here. These are the recipe cards. And then when you click on one of these recipe cards, because these recipe cards themselves are just buttons. When you click on one of these, it pops up a modal that has the whole recipe. So there's individual recipe cards, and then we'll skip down here to the modals. And here's the modal, so that when you click on it, here's the recipe. And these modals run off of JavaScript, and I chose to do that to satisfy the requirements for JavaScript because I'd never worked with modals before. Let's just take a look at the JavaScript for the site. Okay, so here is all the JavaScript for the recipe website. As you can see here, I have my query selectors. Let's see. Here is where I'm getting the modal itself. Here's where I'm getting the modal button. And down here was the kind of goofy part. It was really difficult making a website that had multiple modals on it. So here's where you open and close each modal individually. And I had to call each modal individually. I couldn't figure out another way of doing that, and this method is kind of like a hacky kludge, and it's not very nice, but it works. But yeah, I had to call them each by a unique ID, and I don't know if I can figure out a way of fixing that, but I really don't want to have to create a new on-click for each modal. If I have 100 recipes, it's going to be 100 on-clicks to open and then 100 on-clicks to close. But let's take a look at the website now. So here is the recipes page, and here are 6 sample recipes that I have at the moment. And as you can see, the entire modal The entire recipe card is a button. We have some like fun little CSS styling on them. And when you click on it, it pops open the recipe as a modal, pop up on screen. And down here you can click close and it'll close the recipe modal. You can just click through each of them successively and they all work. But that brings me to some of the challenges that I faced. Firstly, I didn't realize how much effort would go into learning how to use Tailwind. I kind of figured it's a CSS framework, it can't be that hard, but uh, I had to look up pretty much most everything I wanted to do with like any type of CSS property. Um, so it wasn't really hard, but it was just a lot more time consuming than I thought it would be. Uh, Second, I don't want to hard code all of my recipes like this. Um, like it works for the assignment, but it's just not a very good way of doing that. And I couldn't think of another way of doing it since GitHub Pages doesn't support a database. Obviously, a database would be really easy, but you can't do that with GitHub Pages. So I'm looking at maybe using some type of like markdown files and see if that'll work. But yeah, I didn't have time to do that during the course of the assignment. But that's something I want to change moving forward. Um, Lastly, another challenge that I faced was trying to get the footer to stay at the bottom. Um, I could get it to stay at the bottom on the full desktop version of this site, but then when I would shrink it down to like a mobile view, the footer would be like right here in the middle, and it just looked terrible and it was really driving me insane. And I tried a few different solutions, and none of them worked really well until I finally hit on a new solution. Because like one solution, the footer would be at the bottom in desktop view, but then in mobile responsive view, it would be in the middle. And then I tried a different solution that had the opposite problem. I tried a fixed footer, but that looked terrible. But eventually I got it figured out. But that took a lot more work than I thought. Um, and one of the final challenges was the JavaScript logic for the modals. Calling multiple modals on one page was a little bit more work than I thought it would be, and I had to use a unique ID for each modal, which is I can't think of another way of doing it at the moment, but it works. It's kind of hacky, but it works. So moving forward, that's something I want to change is see if I can figure out a new way of handling these modals in the JavaScript. Um, Also, moving forward, like I said, I want to get rid of all these other pages and just have just this page because this will be a website for my friends and I to use when we cook together. Um, and that is it for drunk cooking. Thanks for looking, Professor, and we can move on to part 2.